we have to find critical numbers for a given function. We know that a critical number is a number which belongs to domain of our function, and the first derivative of our function for this number is equal 0, or the first derivative for this number does not exist. So first we need the domain of our f function. We know that sine we calculate for all real numbers and cosine is the same. So the domain for our f function is all real numbers. Next we have to find the derivative of our function. So we have sine 2 squared, so it will be 2 times sine x times derivative of sine x is cosine plus 2, we just copy, and derivative of cosine is negative sine. So we can rewrite this. This is equal to sine x cosine x minus 2 sine x. Now we have to set our first derivative equals 0. If and only if we have 2 sine x cosine x minus 2 sine x equals 0. So we can factorize 2 sine x. In parentheses we will have cosine x minus 1 equals 0. So we have multiplication when this will be 0, when 2 sine x will be 0, or what we have in parentheses, cosine x minus 1 will be 0. So I will divide both sides by 2, so we have sine x equals 0, first equation, and the second is cosine x is equal 1. To solve this equation, we can draw the sinus wave. We know that the sine is between 1 and negative 1 value. This is our y-axis. And what else? We know that the period of sinus is 2 pi. And for pi over 2, the sine has value 1. For 3 over 2 pi, the sine has value negative 1. For pi is 0. For 2 pi, let's just sketch this graph. And this repeats every 2 pi. So we see sinus x is equal 0 for 0, for pi, for 2 pi, and so on. So we can write that x is equal k times pi, when k is integer. So we have solution for our first equation. Now we have to solve the second. We need the cosine wave. So y-axis, and we know that cosine is between 1 and negative 1, 2, the same like sinus. Next we have pi over 2, pi, 3 over 2 pi, 2 pi, and we know that the cosine wave has period 2 pi, the same like sine. So, and we know that for cosine for 0 is 1, for pi over 2 is 0, for pi is negative 1. So we can sketch this graph. So now the value cosine is equal 1 for 0, we see. The next will be for 2 pi. So we can write the x is equal 2 times k times pi, where k is integer. Now we have to put together these two solutions. So x is equal k times pi, where k is integer. So for example, for k equals 0, we have x equals 0 times pi, so is 0. For k equals 1, we will have x equals 1 times pi is equal pi. For k equals -1, because k is integer, it means can be 0, positive, -1, positive, -2, positive, -3, and so on. So for k equals -1, we have x equals -1 times pi is equal -pi. And for example, one more time, for k equals 2, we have x equals 2 pi. We cannot write this whole critical numbers because they are going to infinity. We can put next -2, +3, -3, +4, -4, and so on. So we just write x equals k times pi, where k is integer. The domain of our function was all real numbers, so our solution belongs to domain. So x equals k times pi is critical number.